With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are 2 recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/offsec to learn more. When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you've got a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a regular basis, and we'll reach out to you once they are reviewed. Larry and I know the rest of the crew wanted to spend the top of this segment talking about some very somber news. It's interesting. I'm getting ready to launch a new interview series and show, and in researching that, I went back in hacker history and found like some of the original MIT hackers, and of that, I mean, they were hacking in the 60s. A lot of them are older now. Some of them are 70s or 80s or better, and some of them passed away. I mean, they lived a full life. And then when I got the news about Dan Kaminsky, I'm like, man, I never thought in a million years like I'd have to take too soon, like take Dan off the list of that. And then I was on vacation when I got the news, and I just want the security community that has been posting specifically on Facebook. I haven't necessarily caught up on Twitter on this about Dan and sharing all of their experiences with Dan. I really strongly encourage everyone, like go read that. Like if you're on Facebook, like go search for that stuff. Yep. Because that, even though I was on vacation and not in like direct communication with all of you were there for me when I was trying to process and grieve, and it was super hard, you know. But like reading all the stories, while it made me super sad, I was like, if Dan knew that I was like seeing her on vacation crying, like he'd kick my ass. You know what I mean? No, like that's the kind of person Dan was.
You know, I don't think he probably wouldn't kick your ass. He'd probably put an arm around you and
he'd be like, dude, go do your show, enjoy your vacation. Like that's the kind of person Dan was. You know what I mean? He was always, in my Facebook post talked about this too. Like Dan was always supportive of what we did. Every interaction I had with Dan, he was like, dude, I love the show. I love what you guys are doing. We did an interview with Dan, thankfully. I want to bring that back to the surface so people don't have to dig through the archives to go find it. And, I'll just be forever grateful for not only Dan's contributions to the security community, the good person that he was, but just how inspiring he was to us and everyone in the security. That's what amazed me was I was like, oh, Dan was always super supportive of us. And then you read everyone else's account, and I'm like, Dan was supportive of everyone. And like, that's the person I want to be, supportive of everyone.
Great quote that I found on Twitter from Matt DeVost. And I'll paraphrase a little bit. No one that knew Dan Kaminsky is talking about DNS.
Right.
They are talking about kindness, boundless energy, positivity, spontaneous adventures, and how hard he worked to lift others up. Want to emulate one of the greatest hackers of all time?
Do that.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And
that sums it up very nicely. Those that knew Dan, get behind that statement 100%.
And I interacted with Dan on a number of occasions at DEF CON and at conferences, and he always remembered who I was, which was amazing, because I'm a nobody, but he always made it a point to say hi. One of my first interactions with Dan Kaminsky was right after the big DNS thing happened. And he had just come off stage at Hacker Jeopardy, and they had won, and he had probably drank a case of beer.
There's one thing about Dan, that dude could drink.
Yeah, and it wasn't even about that, which was great.
But it was one of his endearing qualities.
Yeah.
Like, dude, he could put it away, throw it down with you, and
like they had just won, and we were in a small group, and everybody was like, "Hey, Dan," he's like, "I gotta pee. Yeah. I will be right back. I just drank a whole ton."
Right.
And we totally expected, like, that's cool. Dan said hi. But he peed and he came back.
And he came back.
And said hi and chatted with it. Yeah. And after that, somewhere in the archives, we have a picture of Dan.
I gotta find it. I do.
In an orange jumpsuit.
Yes.
Kissing
the hack naked sticker.
The hack naked sticker.
I wish we had it to show on the. We have it somewhere.
And I've been searching for a couple of days, and
I'll find it. I know. I saw it.
We have it.
Not that long ago.
Yep. The only other one that I've got about Dan, and it wasn't about Dan directly. It was funny. I was going through my SANS murder board. I mean, the interviews that they do for you to become a certified instructor.
Yep.
They make you teach to a bunch of SANS instructors, and they harass the crap out of you.
Oh yeah, they heckle.
Oh, that is so intimidating. I remember.
But they're some of the smartest damn hecklers in the whole bunch, right? Yeah.
And it was at the time when it was a reduced murder board thing, and my murder board was with John Strand. John Strand was my murder board.
That might be the worst
if I had to pick my murder board, I wouldn't pick John. Pick John. I mean, John's one of my dearest friends in the whole world. But
and we were talking about data exfiltration on guest wireless networks when captive portal is in use and how you can steal internet access.
Yeah.
And as I was teaching, I said, so I was sitting down with Dan Kaminsky not all that long ago. And he was telling me about this great, amazing hack he had done where he streamed a 640 by 480 episode. No, it was 320 by 240 episode of The Simpsons tunneled over DNS. And you can get data over DNS. And we get to the end of the thing, and John says, dude, don't ever name drop. The only reason you got away with it is because I know you hang out with Dan Kaminsky.
Right.
I'm like, that's pretty cool. Because it was true. We were at DEF CON and we were talking about it, and hey.
But when you said you talked to Dan, you weren't name dropping because Dan was so personable to everyone. And that's what I got reading people's stories was, from the people that were close friends to people that were like, oh, I had this one interaction with Dan.
And he touched
if you had one interaction with Dan, you remembered it.
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of person he was.
Yep.
Well, and not to be hated, I didn't have a relationship with Dan, and I'm actually a little bit sad about that, but. We should not underrepresent the enormous distribution of DNSSEC, right? That was huge, right? To go down that path to actually solve a really legitimate problem in the DNS info. I mean, folks, DNS is the internet, right? The internet doesn't exist without DNS, right? There's some commercial companies that want to subvert it, but DNS is everything.
It's interesting, Joff, you say that the thing about Dan was not only the brilliance in in-depth technical knowledge, and of course with that hacker spirit, but also his ability to talk with people. And when I interviewed Dan, one of the things I took away when we talked about the DNS stuff was how hard he worked to interact with people and convince them that there was a problem and convince them that it needed to be fixed. That was above and beyond the technical accomplishments that had to lead him to that point. It's almost we needed someone like Dan to all have those technical accomplishments, but also be able to talk to people and convince them.
Yep. And the altruism, he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't until the problem could be fixed and had a path going forward or was fixed. And then
he didn't do it for himself. He did it for everyone else.
Right. Yeah. And so many of the things that he worked on were not for him.
Right.
They were for everyone. And I remember when DanCam came out.
Yeah, I remember that. What was DanCam?
So DanCam was...
I remember the term, but
he had a friend that was colorblind, and he wrote an app so that it would change red and green to something else that they could visualize, so they could see red and green effectively.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep. And he gave it away for free.
Yep.
I use that app. It works.
Yep. So, there you go. He did it for other people. He did the technology thing for other people because it wasn't about him.
Yep. Falling asleep at the keyboard too. I feel like that's that's a hacker thing. One of the folks on Facebook posted that they were roommates with Dan, and I don't think it was Jay. I think it was someone else. And they said, he used to fall asleep at the keyboard after being up for almost 2 days and just crash for 8 hours and then wake up and just start typing again. And like I feel like there's a lot of hackers. And I have my own story about that. Like, if you remember when the website was down once because I fell asleep at the keyboard and woke up to like a million text messages and then like had to hit up arrow twice and enter to fix the problem. I was like, oh crap. Like, I feel like that's like, because you're so passionate about what you're working on, right? And Dan absolutely had that, and he will be missed. And I think it's a call to action to our community to be more like Dan, right? Yeah. To be compassionate and understanding and friendly,
spontaneous,
and spontaneous and fun. And that was definitely one of Dan's attributes for sure.
And also remember to walk away a little bit, right? You're not inhuman. Technology can suck you in to such a point that you, and I'm not saying that Dan did this. I have no idea. I don't know Dan personally, but to preserve your life a little bit too, in terms of your health and your overall well-being, right? I mean, it's very easy to get lost sometimes, and we're all humans out here too. I
think in Dan's case, his health is what got him, but no like fault of his own, right? He had diabetes.
It's a tough disease.
Ketoacidosis, which he had struggled with over the last couple of years.
And telling my wife about that too. She sees patients at the hospital, right? She's like, that gets people. She's like, that's really sad. So Dan will be missed, and it won't be the last time we talk about Dan and all of the wonderful things for the community and in technical research. I got a lot of things in my head that I want to plan around that, and some other things I want to bring more to the forefront that it was kicking around in my brain. I think we need to do a much better job of mentorship in coaching in our industry, and I think that's something that Dan did very, very well. And it was those accounts of Dan that really underscored that, right? There was one story where he was like, Dan was talking to someone that found this bug, and the person was going to Dan for advice and explained the whole thing, and Dan was like, wait. He was looking for Dan to help evangelize it. Yeah. And Dan was like, wait, you did all the technical research? He was like, yeah. And you found the vulnerability and you can prove you can exploit it. Yeah. And he's like, I'm talking to the person.
Yeah, I'm talking to the best person.
The best person to fix this problem. He's like, you don't need my help. You are the best person. Right?
Yeah. And every lot of interactions that folks had with him was like, I love this guy. And Dan truly loved him.
Yeah. He would say that a lot.
Like, this guy is responsible for this guy is responsible for this huge thing, when like maybe you only had a huge part of it.
Right.
But it was very much he was trying to be uplifting, and that went a long way. Be like,
there's another theme. There's another theme that you guys just brought out there. Sorry, Tyler, I think I spoke over you, but and that was the idea of teaching and sharing your knowledge, which I fervently believe in. I know Larry does. I know Paul does. We're all here doing this stuff. But Dan certainly believed in that, right? And something that we can all learn from that is that if you know something and you've been in the industry a while, you've been doing your thing, you probably have something to share with other people. So don't, if you're able to do that, if you certainly have public speaking skills, if you have a penchant to teach other people, then don't miss out on that opportunity. I mean, sharing with other people is an enormous advantage for your career, and enormous boost thing you do. There's a lesson.
I think everyone should also take the opportunity to share their Dan stories, because I think that everyone I've read sends a positive message to the community. It honors Dan in such a special way, and does what Dan did, like lifts us all up. You know what I mean? When everyone shares their stories, and I want to thank everyone that did, because it helped me.
And Tyler's got something you wanted to say.
No, I think one of the other key things that is important that we can all kind of come to terms with when we start to think about our mortality is just remembering to appreciate and articulate our gratitude for those that are still with us. Like comes to mind that, I don't often tell you guys how awesome it is to be on the show, how much, it's meant over the years. But like, that's something that's important that, we don't often say out loud, even though, we probably know that each of us means that. But I think it goes a lot further if we can continue to do that while we're all still here.
Agreed, Tyler. Well said. Well said. In that light, there was many people that are like, damn, I want us to continue to fight the good fight and be part of this community. And so we're going to dig into the security news for this week. Apple's AirDrop. A couple of us had this. Lee, I don't know if you had this story as well. I know Larry did, and I did as well. This is an interesting piece of security research. Yeah, and difficult to unpack the second vulnerability.
This is James Lee Vidal, the other SANS author for 617 and instructor after we've taken over from Josh. Huge shoes to fill. We're talking about this as it came out, and the Apple _BLEE tool has implemented part of this already with effectively fake AirDrop services and some tools, and it's not perfect.
So wait, AirDrop is Bluetooth low energy?
It's a combination of Bluetooth low energy and Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Or this attack at least was part of. You need both of these to make both of them work. And effectively, what was happening is with the Apple BLEE tools is that you can get some hashes. And that hash contains portions of the user's phone number. And they're like MD5 hashes, and you can brute force those and recover the portion of the phone number.
The article said you can search data breaches for that hash and sometimes get the plain text from that hash, right? You
can also pre-calculate them because they're very simple hashes. Additionally, now if you know that part of the phone number, which often if I remember correctly, includes the prefix, meaning the area code or the country code and the area code, you can pre-calculate all of the possible phone numbers, the hashes for all of the phone numbers. And when you do that,
rainbow tables.
Exactly. The second part of that is that there's another hash that contains the user's full phone number, which now if you look that up.
Can you pre-calculate a hash table with 10 digits? Like, how long does that take?
It takes forever. That's why you need to calculate it based on your location. So if we were here, if we were going to Starbucks,
you just do 401, so then you're only 7 digits.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so that having the ability to know the prefix. The part that James and I didn't realize is that the user's email address was involved in some of this stuff, and the BLEE stuff,
because it tries to do a match of the address book. Like if you and I are in proximity, we would use AirDrop, and it would send a hash of all my contacts to you.
No, the other way around. Yeah, if I remember correctly.
As the receiver send.
I would send a hash that contains part of my phone number.
Wait, are you the sender or receiver? Because this is where I get confused.
Pitcher, catcher. That's a great question.
Yeah. So I read it as
I am a device that has AirDrop, and I am announcing that I have AirDrop on.
And so you're the receiver, I'm the sender. Do I send you all of my contacts in a hash, and then you hash and receive their match?
As an announcer of AirDrop, I will send email on portion of my phone number, which you will receive to see if I'm in your contacts.
And then to see if I'm in, you are in my contacts.
Correct.
If I've got a hit locally, because it's not going to send the whole list over the air.
Right, because that can be huge. It could be thousands.
Yeah.
So it's, hey.
Can I just say, yes, you're in my contact list? Like, can I respond that way?
That's AirDrop open to everyone. That's public AirDrop. Yep. But still, as a user of AirDrop, and I turn AirDrop on, I'm still gonna beacon out and say, "Hey, I'm Larry at RA Hackers," and so forth.
So I see. So you transmit your hashes. But then I gotta make an entry in my contact list to say, "Yeah, Larry is in my contact list," and then I can do other things.
Then I can send you stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
But can't I send something back saying that Larry is in my contact list?
That's a good question. I do link to the original research, and it did beg a lot of these questions.
Joff's got
Larry, Tyler. Joff, go ahead.
Yeah, so if my understanding is correct, and just clarifying for the list, the weakness really is in a poor hashing algorithm because MD5 has been
correct.
broke.
There's collisions too. Yeah, collisions is something we're
being
not
able to be brute force.
Right.
So and just let's just this out completely for everybody. MD5 is computationally able to be brute force now, so it's peak in terms of modern computing resources, and that's why the data can be discovered.
Joff, I don't know if you need to reset your USB bus, but you're kind of breaking up when you talk. It sounds like your USB.
Sound like shit.
Yeah, your USB bus issue.
No, you sound great. You just
great.
sound choppy.
Yeah, like it cuts out every once in a while.
Okay, I'll rearrange my bus.
Rearrange your bus.
The next story.
There's a hacker.
Stop overloading your bus.
And there was another vulnerability with AirDrop Vuln 2, which I didn't quite understand. The malicious sender does not have to know the receiver. A popular person with a certain context, like the manager of a company, can exploit this design flaw. So I guess what it sounded to me like is if you know, like let's say you go to corporate headquarters and this is before the pandemic and everyone's in the office and you've got a common contact that's in everyone's address book, you can use it to leverage some of the attacks that we talked about in terms of how you transmit, because you basically, like, once you figure out a popular contact's hashing information, you can use that to your advantage as an attacker. That's what it sounded like to me. Again, the details were... I still have vacation brain, and I didn't unpack this as much. But
the big one that I got stuck on is that there are some tools to do some of this type of stuff with the Apple_BLEE set of tools. And for the AirDrop stuff does require Wi-Fi adapter, and Bluetooth Low Energy. And it's an amazing set of tools if you haven't had a chance to play with it. But didn't know about the email address part. That was the part that was like, oh, well, that's interesting.
I feel compelled to say test 1, 2, 3 test.
Very good job.
Is that better?
Yes. And I'm glad you're here, because now we're going to transition to speaking of the great Dan Kaminsky. There was a security advisory for Bind. This advisory had to do with the GSS TSIG extension, which is an extension to the TSIG protocol, which is a transaction signature. Ironically enough, my first SANS paper was on the TSIG buffer overflow in Bind, which you can probably find out there online still today. You can also hear an interview with the managing director of ISC, who was, at the time I interviewed him, I believe still working for ISC, but also the manager of the Bind project at ISC and was managing the developer who introduced the vulnerability that I wrote my paper on, which when I saw TSIG, I was like, whoa, wait, hold on. So this is the transaction signature. Basically, if there's a certain configuration, TSIG, as the article states, intended to support the secure exchange of keys for verifying the authenticity of communications between parties on the network. In other words, if I want to primary DNS server, secondary DNS server, primary server can update the records of the secondary DNS server. You can implement a authentication or key exchange to say, I have to have this key exchange before anyone can update the records of my DNS server, because as Job stated earlier, DNS runs the internet, so that's important.
Oh, wait, that's based on the GSS API, right? I remember that.
Yes, and so SPN Spengo, SPNEGO, Spengo is the negotiation mechanism used by GSS API to negotiate the key exchange, I believe. And the implementation was used by Bind, and that's where the buffer overflow has led. What I also read in this article or advisory was Bind is basically getting rid of this library that they had built in and relying on operating system libraries to support this function, because their implementation, they didn't want to maintain it. I guess the operating system has maintained these libraries, and that's what they're going to use, because the Bind library that was included has the vulnerability.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. And I admit I didn't read it.
Oh,
okay, I'll put my hand up. But I do want to ask: did anybody determine if this was a denial of service, or is there remote code execution opportunity?
This is remote code execution, I believe. Hold on, let me verify that.
bummer.
CVE 2021-25216 is severity high. Configuration, blah, blah, blah. CVS score 8.1.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's remote code. I believe this was remote code execution. Probably got the 8.1 because it relies on certain configurations to be enabled or configured in a specific way in order to be vulnerable. But I believe they're not aware of any active exploits, but this was remote code execution.
Yeah, so if that was actually exploited, the potential exposure is at minimum, whatever DNS zone data that's sitting on that server that's probably very sensitive, and then credentials, and then whatever else is on that box. So it's dangerous. Yeah, I'd say that one's something that needs to be patched.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I've as a tangent to the story, you mentioned your first paper and
yes.
Dan and all this type of stuff. It was something I posted in our Slack, which I thought was fascinating. One of the ones is because many years ago, I think we've been doing the podcast for like 2 or 3 years at that point, and we went to our listeners and said, we need Wikipedia entries. And someone tried, and it was failed because we weren't notable characters or anything like that. I think that's changed. I suspect
we're definitely still characters. Every single one of us.
We might be notable.
Might be notable.
So if any, and it's like considered bad form to create your own Wikipedia entry, which is why we don't have one. So if any of our listeners want to start contributing a Wikipedia entry for myself, like I thought that would be cool.
Oh, but you found I was referenced in Dan Kaminsky's.
So Dan Kaminsky's webpage, Wikipedia entry had something that he was working on for some vulnerability.
It was configure.
Yeah. And the data that said that Dan had referenced was your entry from a blog at Tenable.
I think it was that Dan figured out a way to fingerprint configure.
Yes.
And then Nmap and Nessus had implemented that detection mechanism. And the reference for Nessus goes back to a blog post that I wrote when I was working at Tenable.
Yes.
They didn't, to my knowledge, didn't mention Dan at all. I just gave a cursor.
It didn't because
which is a shame. I feel bad about. But.
And then the other part that I found too was that you were also referenced in the Linksys WRT 54G entry.
Oh, interesting. But not you, even though
as the author of the Linksys WRT 54G.
Well, I mean, it's Wikipedia. Someone needs to someone can update that entry and put Larry's name in there.
But I get it because typically they just list the first author.
The first author,
and A becomes.
I think we were just alphabetical. We just had alphabetical, right?
Exactly. And that was it. So, but I think that was still funny. Like, dude, you're on Wikipedia twice. God damn it.
Someone get Larry in Wikipedia too, will you?
I mean, that begs the question. And maybe I wasn't listening because, I'm old and stuff. But anyway,
in Australia,
does Security Weekly have a Wikipedia?
No.
Like official? Yeah.
Nope.
No. Was the conclusion?
No Security Weekly. No Larry Pesci. No Paul Asadorian.
No Josh Dyer. Come on.
And so
it is spotty. As I said, I'm looking at launching a new interview series style show, and relying on Wikipedia to kind of go back in hacker history. Even some of the original members of early hacking groups, which is just one area that I was researching, like some they'll list the main members of a particular hacking group, and a certain percentage, not 100% of those have Wikipedia pages. Then they list like other members' handles, and they're like, we don't know who these people are at all, and there'll be no reference to them, whatever, and not even a reference to like that particular thing. In other cases, Leonard Rose is an example, aka Terminus, who we interviewed on the show. They say, well, Leonard Rose was purportedly the mastermind behind the Legion of Doom, which is not true. And they're like, citation needed. You merely need to go to our interview with Leonard himself to hear that citation where he's like, I was not. In my reading of all of the hacker history books about Legion of Doom, Masters of Deception, there's nothing that points that Leonard had any involvement whatsoever, especially let alone being the mastermind. That was just in my mind, the press wanting to put a figurehead behind it.
Tyler's making the face that he wants to say something. But Tyler, before you do, I think that's a failure in Wikipedia.
I agree.
In that they don't consider these other alternate sources of medium for their citations.
Right.
Tyler.
Yeah, I'm just curious how we start to preserve some of this, because there are some of the hackers that are getting a little bit older. Like, we've went through a lot of stories. There's a ton of history on podcasts. There's a ton of history, stories that have been exchanged by friends that get repeated, that get changed. Like, this seems like something that a lot of us have we've done our fair share of drinking. We don't want that that loss of memory to catch up with us at some point, and some of these stories just to flat get lost. So how do we start to preserve some of that?
That's true.
I could not find a book on specifically the Legion of Doom. I found a book on the Masters of Deception, which talks a lot about the great hacker wars, they call it, in the 90s, right, between the two. Joseph Menn did a great job on CDC, Cult of the Dead Cow. The Loft folks have been really vocal in articles and interviews. I don't know that there's a book about the Loft, but you get their story just because they're many of them are very forthcoming. We've done interviews with them. Malicious Life just did an interview with them.
Oh, and I want to say that there were some books that
maybe
actually talked about some of the Loft, and
right.
Yeah, because I remember specifically Kingpin, aka Joe Grand.
Yeah.
What they talked about when he was becoming a member, and like his parents would drop him off. And
now we're off on a tangent, but I just want to say, like, Joe Grand's story in his account of being in Loft is some of my favorite, because he was so young.
Yep.
And he talks about, like, he wasn't old enough to drive, and he would basically ride his skateboard over to the Loft through like shady areas in Boston to like make it there. And how his parents were like, "What are you hanging out?" He's like, "I was hanging out with other shady characters, but I hung out with these hacker people, and they helped me put it on the straight and narrow." Like, there's a lot of great stories. Tyler, to your point, we need to preserve, these stories for sure, because there's gaps in my research. There's gaps.
I really think that it's probably time either an audience member or a really willing intern get into creating as a Wikipedia entry. That would be fantastic, right? I mean, like, you can contribute to this thing, right? There's some rules. You read up on the rules. You start building.
And there's some books that you can reference that would be citations in Wikipedia's definition of a citation that would be accurate. I've fact checked a lot of the sources, and they're pretty good. Some of the books are older, but definitely because I'm doing research for the show, I've been there's a book that recounts Kevin Mitnick and a European German hacker. What was his name?
Is that
in the 90s? What was his name?
Was that book Cyberpunk by John Markoff?
I think so. Because
I think I have a copy of that around somewhere in Dead Tree edition if you want it. I read that book in the 90s when it first came out, and it was
Hacker
amazing.
Wikipedia. Maybe we should just make our own Wikipedia, hackerwikipedia.com.
Tyler, I don't. Why not the traditional Wikipedia stuff? Because we know that stuff gets backed up ad infinitum on the Internet Archive. On a number of different offline tools. Like, I can think of a number of prepper things that take full copies of Wikipedia and put them on drives so that you can have this offline knowledge. To me, that's a great way to keep that stuff, as opposed to some hacker wiki that is a fly-by-night operation run by hackers. It's a hack type of thing. So.
Okay, Cyberpunk Outlaws and Hackers on the Computer Frontier
by John
Katie
Markoff.
Hafner and John Markoff.
Yep.
Recounts the Kevin Mitnick and then delves into, I can't remember the other person's name.
I can't remember.
And then Bruce Sterling has one of the quintessential, the Hacker Crackdown, Law and Disorder on the Electronic Frontier, which is about the 90s hackers. And then Audible, I haven't read this one yet, commissioned a book called Freaks, which is about phone freaking. And then next up on my list is Cyber Wars, The Black Chamber by R.C. Bray. So I've got
R.C. Bray will be a good one.
Masters.
And we need a way to exchange like some Audible books, like rent them out.
The book that if you like the movie Hackers, or even don't appreciate the movie Hackers, you got to go read or listen to Masters of Deception, The Gang That Ruled Cyberspace. And I read that largely because John Lee, a.k.a. Corrupt, appeared on Security and Compliance Weekly, say it was part of Masters of Deception. I'm like, well, that was kind of interesting. I found that book and read it. I was like, oh god, like it's opened up a whole story that I had, like, you've heard pieces of this story, right? If you've been in cybersecurity for 20 years, like all of us old farts have, and some of us listening, right? And you listen to this book and you're like, oh, like so many things connect. And even though this is recounting hacking from the 90s, it's like still super relevant to what's happening today. Like that hacker spirit still has that thread that you can follow to today. So
yep.
All good stuff.
And before we leave here tonight, I want to grab a couple of those names of those books, because
absolutely,
I've got a ton of Audible credits, and
I'll leave that up so you can copy it after.
Yeah.
I think we have a Discord channel of book recommendations.
We do.
And I'll get those from you, and I will post them, Paul.
Awesome. We'll make sure those get in there. Okay, where do we want to go next? There was some interesting story. I wanted to make sure we let's talk about pen testing. Got to talk about pen testing, because what was interesting?
Don't want to.
Well, what was interesting about this week is from the same source. Like, HelpNet Security does a great job of covering cybersecurity and hacking. I just want to throw that out there. Like, you folks are doing a great job, and I use you as a source. Go to HelpNet Security. It's a great source for news, not just on the enterprise side, but also on the regular, security news side. They ran 2 articles. One was sponsored by the first one, Leaving Too Many Blind Spots, was it. So before you poo-poo it, I just want to say I've spoken with and tested the product of Rob Gurzeev, the CEO of Cycognito. Rob is a total ninja, and I tell you what, we've personally, Adrian, I've tested his product and we're really impressed. We really said really nice things about the product, and his product is in attack surface management. And I think this was not like you shouldn't do pen testing. I think this was like you need something to make sure you're covering your attack surface. So put that in this context and realize, like, again, I've met Rob. I've talked with him. He's awesome. I've tested his product. And I can't say anything bad about his product either, because I thought it was really good. But they surveyed 3,000 employees. I think, is that what they said? Or more than that? Yeah, 3,000 employees. 70% of organizations perform pen tests as a way to measure their security posture, and 69% to prevent breaches, yet only 38% test more than half of their attack surface annually. So that's like, again, put this in context. I don't think saying pen testing is bad. You could read this data and say, well, pen tests are going after the part of the infrastructure that's really vulnerable, right? Is one way you could look at that. Like, the reason why that we're focused on that maybe 38% maybe only test half of their attack surface is like, that's the half that was really bad. Maybe the other half wasn't as bad, is one way to look at that. So they say organizations are conducting pen tests to detect and mitigate threats, yet remain dangerously vulnerable. Research shows that when using penetration testing as a security practice, organizations lack visibility over their internet-exposed assets, resulting in blind spots that are vulnerable to exploits and compromise. This could also be framed as scoping as well. That we're often not scoped to test just the external attack surface. We're scoped to say, yeah, your external attack surface is going to have some holes in it. Let's test what's internal, because that's almost more important. Like, okay, someone's got to get in, but what they can they do when they get in, kind of thing. Lots of other stats. Or budget, too.
We come back to budget being a huge... companies can only afford so much without the buy-in and upper-level support. So.
Right. Yeah, and I think 47% say that pen testing detects only known assets and not new or unknown ones. I think that's really scoping, though. Like, you would scope and say, okay, like, go find the ones that maybe I don't know about. Like, if I'm the CISO for an organization,
time and budget, though.
Yeah, too. Time and budget and scoping. And so maybe I'm not gonna look. I'm gonna put myself in the shoes of a CISO. Am I gonna hire Joff, Larry, and Tyler to go after stuff that I don't know about? No, I'm going to go after the stuff I know about, because that's the stuff that's really sensitive. And then I'm going to do stuff internally to go find the stuff I don't know about. Then, hey, when you guys come back the next time, now go after this other stuff, right? So
Yeah,
it all depends on like how you
that's
scope
right.
it, I guess.
Well, that's right. I mean, we have customers come to us, and I'm sure Larry and Tyler have had this experience as well. That maybe it's their first rodeo, and they're like, "Look, I want you to test everything," and we're like, "Oh, wait a minute, you got to give us a little bit of focus here because we have to have a starting point, right? I mean, you
Right.
cannot come to a pen tester and say, I just want you to test everything. Everything's vulnerable. Oh my God, the world's on fire." No, that's not going to work, right? But it is a balance between getting the right focus on the right risk and the right priorities versus getting the coverage, and it's always a business decision because we don't do stuff for free, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think it's a coverage.
budget,
But
right?
to your point, Jeff, I think it's a coverage versus depth and breadth. So they also say like 79% believe that pen tests are costly. Okay. 78%
Sure they are.
would utilize a pen test on more apps if the costs were lower. But what would be the value of that? Again, I'm going to put my CISO hat on. I want to make sure we've got an SDLC process and a DevOps process that's testing more code with more coverage in production so that when I do bring in pen testers, I focus them on the apps that are more pertinent to the business, that they can do more of a deep dive, knowing that I'm going to try to cover as much as my other attack surface as much as possible with automated tools, with process, with other
You just nailed
methods,
it,
right?
You just nailed it. Get the breadth out of the automation.
Yes.
And use the pen tester resource to get you the real deep dive and the depth at a point perspective, right? In a very focused area that the pen testing firm has experience in that no automated tool is possibly going to cover.
Yeah.
That's the way to deal with it.
Right. And I think
Spend the money wisely.
to Rob at Psychognito, I think it's a great argument for the both of these articles, right, kind of painted as like one or the other. That's not it. I use pen testers. Again, Paul's got a company. I'm a CISO. I'm going to use pen testers. I'm going to have attack surface management, and I'm going to have a vulnerability management program. And they're all going to test the different stuff in different ways to make sure that I got the most coverage possible to reduce my risk. And these are all effective tools and techniques and methods to help me understand where my weaknesses are so I can fix them as fast as possible. And I would also argue the better you are at attack surface management and vulnerability management, the better I can focus my pen testers on what really matters.
Yeah, I
Reduce
was
the
about
risk
to
where
make
it
that
matters.
comment, actually. The maturity of your awareness and your security program in-house is going to reflect your ability to get the right results in the right areas. Until you have your own house in order to a certain extent,
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't hire pen testers, right? You
Right.
need to, Anyway, Tyler had a comment, I think.
No, I was just saying that's really focusing that risk mitigation on the stuff that really matters. Because if you get good coverage, or even if you mitigate a ton of risk, but that risk isn't really the business driver or the attacker mindset, like you need to focus your risk on where the attacker is going to go and what is actually going to get attacked. That's where your focus should be. And that's a lot of what a good pen test does is they analyze the business risks decisions. They provide you the data, and then you have to make the business risk decisions. At the end of the day, that's all any of this is business risk decisions. And sometimes that means taking risk.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too, when I look at this article, having tested, we tested well over a dozen different products in attack surface management. And I would stand by my recommendation that every enterprise, you need an attack surface management tool. That doesn't mean you're not going to do pen testing, right? I want these tools running to know when new infrastructure is spun up. I want them to even identify vulnerabilities in some of these things on an ongoing basis. And that's a function that I want of my IT and security departments in my organization. When I bring on a pen test team, it's for a completely different reason.
It should be.
You shouldn't bring on, in other words, you shouldn't bring on a pen test team to go, tell me about my attack surface that I'm exposed to the internet.
All my shit.
Adrian and I just brought in all these tools in the lab. There are totally tools that can do that, right? In fact, I think by bringing in something like a Psycognito as an example, you're in a better position to guide your pen test team where you want them to focus, right? So I think these articles, and I've got one that talks about like pen tests and where they don't necessarily work. Again, attack surface management. I've got another article that talks about how to conduct what is pen testing and what it is and what it's not. And I got another one that talks about vulnerability assessments. You read these 3 articles, it doesn't mean you're not going to do one or other. You're going to do all these things. And I think in an enterprise at a certain scale, you want all these things, but you want them tied together in a cohesive program. And that's really, I think, the challenge in security.
I think there's another point there that needs to be made, and that is for those who are just starting out or maybe have a small, medium-sized business and don't really know where to start, don't be afraid to reach out to a security consultancy. And what you might want to ask for is not a security assessment. You might want to ask for some consulting on how to build a security program,
right?
In your context, in your size business, because that's a very valuable service to you, and you can choose how much is right for you and your size business and your risks, and then go from there.
So it's interesting. Sorry, Lee.
So there was a point that you went by real fast, Paul, and I wanted to come back to it because you started to make it earlier. You were talking about you just want the pen test to focus on your prioritized assets, and then, but you started, you're getting into discovery, knowing what you have. With a lot of stuff with cloud and shadow IT, discovery is becoming really important, and I don't want to necessarily pay a lot of money for somebody to discover stuff I don't know about. Otherwise, I can't prioritize what I want them to look at because I don't know what I have. And I think that's huge. And that's, whether it's a pen test or a vulnerability assessment, discovery is key. And like I said, I don't want to find out about things I didn't know about. Not really. I think that was a point you were starting to make.
And what you say really resonates with me, Lee, because I think I've always been the opinion that if I can discover and classify on my own, why am I going to bring in a pen test firm to do that, right? I want to bring in a pen test after I know what I have. Maybe I know 98% of what I have, and that's good enough for now. Once I know what I have, I want to focus someone on that. And I think that in looking at the technology, both in vulnerability scanning and assessments and management, and looking at the technology in attack surface mapping, I can do that on my own. I don't need to hire awesome pen testers to go do that. I can do that on my own. And I can say that because I worked in vulnerability management, and we just did a huge test on asset management. That technology exists. And guess what?
Right.
I want that technology to tell me about what I have and what the state of everything is. And then I want to bring in the expert pen testers to go, I know I have this web app, but guess what? This web app is what helps run my business. And we have one of those here, right? Like, raise your hand if you got an app that helps run your business and you developed it yourself because it's the most important thing to your business, or one of the most important things. I want to make sure that shit's secure, right? First. And that's what I want the pen testers to focus on, because that's, the stuff that I'm not going to get from those automated scanning and testing and assessment tools. But I want those automated assessment discovery tools to feed into all my other stuff, to go, like someone stood up to your point, Lee, someone spun up some cloud infrastructure, and these tools like Psycognito does exactly this. Like, they'll look at what my corporate logo is and find every instance of that across the internet. And there's a lot of companies that do it in all different ways, and find that, someone on my team used their credit card and spun up some infrastructure and used the logo, and I didn't know about that. That's what those tools do well. I don't want to hire Larry to go do that. I want to hire Larry to go test my app that runs my business and tell me about that, right?
Right.
I mean, if you want to just turn a blind eye, you don't want to hire me to do that.
But
you know what
also,
I'm saying?
I want the pen testers to go, okay, do a phishing exercise, or implant yourselves inside, my air quotes network, inside my environment, and then tell me about how quickly you can find keys to the kingdom and do other things, right? That to me is more of the value. So all these things have to work, I think, in unison.
I think it's important to point out that that the technology to do asset discovery and vulnerability management and to do all this stuff, it's not free. You can do a lot of things very low cost, but eventually you're going to have to invest. But it's not going to be as much as bringing in a pen testing firm. And honestly, don't waste your money until you've got those asset and vulnerability management program in order, because it's a lot cheaper to spend the money on the technology and keep that stuff in-house before you go out to a pen testing firm.
It's interesting, Job, to your point, we're doing vulnerability management next. And one of my roles is to look at the open source aspects of that. You can do a lot with open source attack surface management. I've got a tech segment queued up for Amass, does a great job of attack surface management. You can look at open source vulnerability scanning. Certainly Nmap, OpenVAS, cover that. You can do a lot of that on your own. I look at that as more of a proving ground to go, here's some of the value, here's what we can accomplish with free tools. What I've observed in the commercial tools is it gives you a lot of extra stuff that it builds on top of that, right? It makes it a lot easier and more efficient to build it into your processes with a much lower cost to entry. I can go grab one of these products. I mean, a lot of these companies have a free product too, and also a commercial offering. And the commercial, some of these are awesome. Like I plug it in, it goes, I click a button, it finds the stuff, it feeds into my process, and you're off to the races, right?
Yeah, but we can't overlook the fact that, not that we want to get down to basic business here, but part of it is that we can't overlook the fact that you will need a technically focused individual to even focus on the open source tools. Because what open source really means is in-house supported.
Yeah,
that's what open source really means, right? So you're going to pay a salary for that, but you can probably justify that on the basis that person is wearing multiple hats and doing a little bit of vulnerability management, maybe doing a little bit of sysadmin, maybe dealing with your business at your scale before you grow to the next level.
Yeah, it's support and maintenance, right? Maintenance of the open source stuff is the cost.
But Joff is making another point in there too, without saying it. A good firm like Joff's or Larry's or any of the others we know,
Tyler,
will assess where you are in maturity and where you've got gaps. They're not going to start with a pen test if what you need is a assessment, or you don't even know what the hell you have. You're down here with low-level discovery.
Yep.
They're not going to just take your money if they've got some ethics. They're going to back off and help you get where you need to be, because there's no value, in knocking you down.
Yeah, it's no fun to completely wipe the floor with them with like Windows XP vulnerabilities. Like, it's not fun.
I just want to point out, Jay Paz is the director of pentest operations at Cobalt. I thought he summed it up nicely. Scanning for vulnerabilities and penetration testing are both necessary components of a comprehensive security strategy. One does not replace the other. That's in 2 sentences. He sums up a lot of what we said on this show.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And then how to conduct a vulnerability assessment. A vulnerability scan provides a point-in-time snapshot of vulnerabilities present in an organization's digital infrastructure. Well said.
Right.
That's how I couldn't phrase it any better myself, right? New deployments, configuration changes, newly discovered vulnerabilities, and other factors can quickly make the organization vulnerable again. For this reason, you must make vulnerability management a continuous process rather than a one-time exercise, right? I think that vulnerability management and attack surface management go hand in hand. Slightly different, although what I've found so far in testing these technologies is they kind of go hand in hand. I think there's also a splash of threat intelligence. I had some attack surface management platforms tell me that I had credentials that have been stolen on the dark web. Some of those actually tell me what my clear text password was.
Yikes.
I was like, oh, I've got an account. We need to go change some passwords. That's extreme. That's extremely valuable, and not something that I would look to an external pen test firm. Like, that's awesome. You can tell me that. I'm gonna go fix that on a regular basis. Awesome.
And you don't have the time to figure that out and keep watch yourself. That's really the value.
It takes
of
away.
what threat
You're
intelligence
exactly
is.
right, Tyler. It takes away a lot of that manual effort of doing that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm excited about I would also throw in this category we'll be testing later: breach and attack simulation. I think that plays into this mix nicely as well. And as Lee, to your point, your pen test firm should help you realize and define your security maturity where you're at today.
Right.
I think highly, if you're in the upper quadrant, if you will, of security maturity, you've got attack surface management, vulnerability management, and breach and attack simulation all working together inside of patch management and have a very cohesive process for that. That's not easy to tie all those things together. I would love for see some consolidation integrations there to make that easier for organizations. But to me, that if you can get that process working really well, you're in great shape. Then you go to your pen test firm and you're in a much better position.
So, Paul, speaking of breaches, I think maybe moving along a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
I'm noting a theme through a lot of the stories that were submitted this week. I'll start from the top down, and I'm not going to go into them. I'm just going to read titles. Let's see. Experian API exposed credit scores of most Americans. 250 million American sensitive data leaked online by Pom Pom Purim. Let's see. Hacker leaks 20 million alleged BigBasket user records for free logins for 1.3 million Windows RDP servers.
HashiCorp feels exposure of private code signing keys after code code compromise.
Yep. There was another one. And I can't remember the provider. The website, not a website. The hosting provider starts with an O. Credential payment information leaked. Crap.
Oh, he's having a senior moment.
Yep. And it was one of the
you
ones
thinking DigitalOcean, right?
DigitalOcean. So yeah, it started with an O with the ocean part. Yeah, DigitalOcean.
Yep, there we go.
They had payment credentials, payment stuff really.
You and Tyler were in like a Vulcan mind meld right there. That was impressive.
Yeah.
That was very cool.
Like there was things that I needed to say that I couldn't say that I'm looking at Tyler trying to do
knew.
that. And
Tyler just knows.
You knew. Yep. So like so many compromises, releases of data, or like millions and millions of stuff. And the irony is that while we were on the show doing the interviews, I learned about the Experian API one.
Yes.
So I added that during.
That was a Krebs story. Yeah,
that was the Krebs show that came out a little bit earlier today, and I learned about it, while we were on the show. So
that one has some seriously damning data in it.
Yeah, and the discoverer for that is not releasing any information. They've talked to Experian about it because they feel that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of websites that use that same API.
If not more.
Oh, it's like a legitimate credit check.
It's a legitimate credit check, and found that all you needed to do to get your credit score was a name, first and last address, and there was something else.
One other piece.
There was
date of birth
date of birth, and they found that if they put all zeros in for the date of birth, it accepted it and would give you their credit score.
Oh, jeez.
Tyler, you've talked about stuff like that too.
That
once you start, like you grab pieces of let's just take a person, right? Or you've got lists of people, and you just start pulling different bits of information and then use that information to get more. You're basically, it's like an underground way to enrich your own data
set.
And there's lots of commercial places that do that too. I mean, full disclosure,
that's how they do credit. That's how they do like Clear. You talk about Clear, you talk about credit reports, you talk about background checks, especially government or federal background checks.
Commercial organizations do that all the time as well.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, the sad part is, and I think Tyler is nearing the same spot. I've given up trying to collect all this data. I know Tyler has not, because there is just so much of it that me personally, I don't have room to store it. Yeah. And I have lots of disk, and like for me personally, this does not make sense for me as a tester. Although
you got to choose your battles.
Yeah, although this would make an amazing research
project
for someone to.
I mean, this would be a nice commercial product you could just subscribe to for a low cost and
I agree, Tyler.
Yep.
I mean, there are some vendors that do that in threat intelligence, but it's spotty, right? Like I feel like
it's hard to keep up with.
Yeah, because I feel like you subscribe to one and that gives you some pieces, and you got to subscribe to another to get you other pieces. Like you're always left with storing and then correlating and putting that data back together yourself. Tyler, I know you spend a lot of time doing that as well.
The correlation piece is the hard part, right?
Yeah.
You've got to normalize the data for one. You've got to store it, and then you've got to make it useful in some avenue. And if that's to major corporations, whether that's threat intelligence feeds or whether that's for research or PI firms or hunting people down or whatever it might be, making that data useful and continually updated, like that's managing personas, staying in dark web. Like
there's no one source. There's no one source. Like all the folks that I know that are doing cyber threat analysis, or they're a cyber threat analyst, right? That's their job, is to take in multiple threat feeds and help aggregate that. And oftentimes they're not coders, right? Like they have coders that they work with, and they're cyber threat analysts, and so they know what data they want and they know how to get there, and they'll oftentimes go to, a lot of times their military background. And
it's a lot of manual work now.
Yeah, it's a lot of manual work, and they'll go to coders to help them with that. But they know like all their different sources, and they validate those sources and bring it together. It's an art and a science kind of rolled into one. It's interesting.
Yeah, unfortunately, we see these billion-dollar products and all this revolutionary security that we're continually bringing to front, and yet we still have 15 breaches in the news in 1 week.
Yep.
It also should be said though that these great ideas take significant amount of time and energy to develop. I mean, we can espouse this stuff, but I'll give you an example.
Job's got Python code running in the back of his brain as we're talking, right?
Yeah, I do. Like at Black Hills, we spun off active countermeasures, right? We thought we could do that in a relatively short period of time. It took an enormous amount of energy, and it took real people resources to actually get that thing off the ground. And it's an amazing thing now, but and the concept, it's all about that intellectual property. The concept is huge, and it goes for any of these things. But it takes, all these ideas for the people that want to get behind them and put the energy behind them. There's so many in the industry. You just have to hang out with people and think about it for a while. There's just so much out there.
Yeah. And but Job, to your point, and actually to Lee's earlier point, right, to read between the lines, like you can have an idea, but it's the execution of that idea.
It's the execution.
That is really where the value is, right? Because, we could say all day long, oh, you could do this and do that. And we could even give you the mathematical formula behind that. But to put that in practice and actually make it work, like I almost believe that your intellectual property is more about your processes and less about your like actual tech, right? Because the tech is the tech, right? It's your application behind that and the process behind that. Even some of the tools, you can give away the tools, but if you don't have that process, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah. No, it's a really, really difficult thing. And I've watched it in motion, at Black Hills as we tried to do this, and I was personally involved in the early stages. And this is not easy to. It's one thing to have the idea, to turn the thing into a production ready and publicly supportable commercial entity. There's a big road between concept and that point.
You know what? And you need smart people like Chris Brenton and Bill Stearns.
Yes, you do. Those guys are great.
And those are the guys behind active countermeasures today. And I couldn't choose two better people to take that idea that you're talking about, Joff, right, in threat hunting and bring that to life. Two of the smartest people I know, right? I mean,
super, super smart people. They absolutely made it happen. Big shout out there to Chris and Bill.
Yeah.
They're great to work with, and
Bill is one of the most amazing Linux people on the planet. By the way,
he's great. He's great. It's funny. Our relationship today is pretty much, Chris and or Bill, both of them coming to me and say, "Hey, Joff, throw some malware over the fence. We want to see if we can attack."
Yeah, awesome.
Which is awesome. It's so much fun.
And also, how is Hal Pomerantz doing? Hal Pomerantz is one of the best Unix Linux people on the planet.
Hal's fantastic. He's done a few things with us with Wild West Hackin' Fest.
Yeah.
He's continuing to do some stuff with us. Hal's just a bunch of fun. Hal's still working with Sans as well.
Yeah, I don't think Hal ever forgets anything about Unix or Linux, because you'd almost want to say like Hal's forgotten more about Unix or Linux than I ever learned. But like, I don't think Hal ever really forgot anything.
No.
I really don't. Like,
really
that dude
funny.
is so. I've watched some of his webcasts, man. Like, if our listeners, if you have not caught a webcast by Hal Pomerantz, you are missing
totally
out.
have
His
Anything by
kung
Hal.
fu is amazing. I'm astonished
it's-
all the time with Hal.
Hal's great, right? I mean, I'm somebody that I can say I definitely have forgotten more than I've learned.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the drinking that does that.
No, but Hal goes back to like Bell
retains
Labs.
it.
He was at like Bell Labs with some of the people that were developing early Unix. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
he's great.
He's great. He's great.
And
Oh, can I do a shameless promotion? Real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah.
Real quick, Joff, not to get off topic, but you want to have some other fun too. Mr. Tom Liston just had some recent interactions with him, and he's been having all sorts of fun on Twitter lately, and just with some blog posts. And I went back. I literally went back and read like a year's worth of his blog posts just because he has a way with words.
He does.
And is an amazing
He's a
storyteller.
wordsmith.
All right, Joff, self-promotion.
Oh, yeah, quick self-promotion. I just want to remind everybody that I'm doing a thing on regular expressions. It's just a 4-hour, one-day thing. I actually spun this up literally just for fun.
Who does regex for fun, Joff?
Joff.
Yeah, I do regex for fun. Paul
Nobody
got really
else.
excited about it. He goes, "No way, Joff, you're doing regex for fun."
Yeah. When are you teaching this, Joff?
So it's May 20th. I think I got a bit.ly link still for it.
You do.
What is the link?
Bit.ly slash
Regex for fun.
Joff RE Life. Okay,
Yes,
so if you hit
that's it.
that up,
Okay, I'm
you
hitting
get
that up.
regular
Oh, no,
expressions.
I'm
Your
not-
new
I'm not getting
lifestyle
that.
is what I called it.
I'm not getting
And-
that. Bit.ly forward.
Bit.ly slash Joff RE Life.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah. So I wanted to promote that because look, one of my
not
old
getting
friends.
that.
The reason I wanted to mention it, and it's sort of becoming fun now. One of my old friends in
Discord.
past university days, he caught wind of it and he goes, "Joff, I'm in a master's program for data analytics," and he goes, I would you mind if I promoted this to all the university students? I was like, sure, go ahead. He goes, because everybody needs regular expression skills. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah,
right?
I'm getting a 404 on that, Joff.
Joff RE
what?
Life.
Yeah, Lee posted it in the.
I put it
Yeah,
in
look-
Discord. I put it in Discord
when
but
I click it. It says
screwed it up
I get a
somehow.
404 from Bitly.
HTTPS or Joff, not Joff, bit.ly
Yeah.
slash Joff RE Life.
Yeah, I got that.
LIFE. Does case matter?
I think case matters. It's capital J, capital R, and capital L in life.
and not capital
okay,
E.
let me-
No.
Oh, okay, now I got it. No
Okay,
capital
cool.
E.
Yeah, cool.
Hey,
So
there it is.
There it is.
The full
Tuesday,
link-
Tuesday,
Yeah.
May 25th, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Oh, so I totally got May 20th wrong.
That's okay. I want to make sure we got this. Is a cool thing. This is a pay what you can class.
Yeah. I still spelled it wrong in the thing. But yeah, it's a pay what you can. We're recommending a minimum $25. I mean, $25. Come on.
And Joff, are you donating a portion of the proceeds to
Yes.
underprivileged people in cybersecurity?
Underrepresented people
Underrepresented, I
in information
should say,
security. And again,
Underrepresented
we do the same thing as I do with
Security
my
Weekly podcast
enterprise. Oh, sorry, Lee, go ahead.
I said underrepresented Security Weekly podcast hosts. How sweet.
Yeah, Carlos. Where's Carlos at?
Or,
Yeah,
or Jack
seriously.
Daniel.
Sorry, Joff. Go
Jack
for
Daniel.
No, look, we donate. It's a 10% figure. Was actually 5%. It's 10% of 50%, right? So that's 5%. It's a 5% figure of the total take to underrepresented demographics in information security, and we assess that on a periodic basis. But today, that is women in information security are considered demographically underrepresented, and we have several charities that we donate to on that basis, right? One of them is you remember Chloe Mestagi?
Yeah.
She's got WOSEC in, I think it's WOSEC, if I remember correctly, in San Francisco, and it's actually worldwide. And there's WESIS, and there's one other, and I'm just forgetting right now. But we continue to do that as part of my contribution, and I'm going to continue as long as I can, because I've got an amazingly talented daughter, and I want to see women in STEM fields actually advance in general, but also in the cybersec industry.
I tell you what, 4 hours with Joff on regex, you will not regret it. Like, that is something you will use.
Or you might.
No, you will use that. I mean, whether you're just using grep on the command line all the way into Python and other languages that implement regex. I mean, regex is pretty universal, right?
Very powerful, very universal. Yeah. I will tell you right now, we're doing awk, grep, Python, PowerShell, and I mentioned grep already, and just sort of generic examples, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of stuff in there.
I want to say that I took I don't know how many hours of regex from Joff in 573 when he was teaching that, which was an awesome experience. And I wound up applying what I learned there, debugging a piece of shell code that had I shared you the regex. I remember it was pretty gross, but it worked after I fixed it.
That's all regex. That's all regex. We could describe as pretty gross.
But must always document regex.
But I think once you come out of Joff's class, you'll go from looking at regex and go, it's pretty gross, to actually understanding it.
And that's gross.
Yeah, that's
scary, but cool.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, that's much of a segue.
I love it. I love it. So next news item, Larry.
I had one that, like,
please do.
This one grabbed me, and Lee might find this one actually kind of fascinating. I don't know if he dug into it at all. But my story number 2, a novel way to deliver cross-site scripting.
A novelle or novel?
Novel.
You said novel.
A new, interesting,
I think
fantastic.
Novelle's capital N.
With 2 L's. Right? Novelle is with 2 L's, right? Right. Yeah.
Noelle is different. That's Chris.
Everybody had when you said that. It's just like, oh my God, flashback.
IPS XPX.
Yes.
No. The point being here is that this security researcher, SSX Fox, was doing some playing with a bunch of websites that display APRS information.
What's APRS?
So APRS is a quote ham radio protocol that is used for effectively beacons that are you're transmitting on a specific frequency with some messages like, I'm at this location, latitude and longitude. APRS also can be used for weather information. Hey, my weather station is at so many feet, its barometer at this, and so forth and so on. But there are a number of aggregation sites, just like ADSB. Folks capture ADSB beacons for aircraft, and there's a bunch of sites that capture them and display them and so forth. There's a number of websites that capture APRS from public sources. And the APRS messages can also be used for, kind of like text messaging in some cases for digital radio and so forth. And this particular individual decided to transmit their own APRS messages, including various portions of cross-site scripting code, and then went and proceeded to look at the received messages on these websites. And
so and I've seen this in the past, there are sites and apps that listen on radio frequencies.
Yep.
Do they do text or I'm sorry, speech to text?
It is typically, it's what they refer to as a digital mode.
Okay, so these are like text messages over like ham radio frequencies.
Right.
Okay.
And it's converted to an analog format. Like if we think about POXAG pager traffic, we talked about this way back in the day.
Yeah.
Like you take a message, a digital message, and you convert it to audio, and it like your modems did. Send it over an analog medium, RF, and received, decoded, and then it takes that message and posts it to a web page.
You're decoding the radio frequency transmission into text.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So as part of the transmissions that she had, there's somewhere in here in her in the feed about the actual messages that she sent the actual APRS messages, and they included cross-site scripting, and they
Because
included
people take those text messages, put them on a website, and then
and they don't filter
And
the
they don't
damn
filter
inputs. Like, that's amazing.
so awesome.
Yeah, that was my QNAP rebooting because I didn't want to get QNAP ransomware, by the way.
Oh.
Not that mine's exposed to the internet, but
At least not at the moment.
Got to be careful.
Yep. So yeah, I thought that was absolutely fascinating about the messages, and so I can't forget where I saw it, but I did see that the messages that she had actually sent and the cross-site scripting that they included were just
On a different note, have any of you folks used PHP Composer?
No.
Very scary.
sounds like it.
It's-
You had me at PHP.
Yeah, so it's build.
PHP scary.
So PHP is scary. If you tack on the word composer after that, it's like even scarier. I used this in one project that I was working on, and when I did it, I was like, "Oh, that can't be good." And I think I might have even ripped it out after that. So Composer is a tool for dependency management in PHP, enabling easy installation of packages relevant to a project. So it's like apt or pip, but for PHP. And when you think about apt or pip, we have this expectation of security. And then, but if you put PHP in the mix of that sentence, like all your expectations of security go out the window. Even more so when it's like a package manager for PHP. Like I said, I used it in a project and I was like, oh, this is just not good. It's like pulling packages from PHP, managing the dependencies for you, and pulling down packages from the internet with like what I could tell not much validation. And I'm like, this is bad. Lo and behold, they found a bug in Composer, which Sonar Source was the company that found it. So the way package source download URLs are handled, leading to a scenario where an adversary could trigger remote command execution. So like basically this means you run PHP Composer, install this package. That package then can gain full code or command injection into your PHP system, which could be really bad. For example, if you're building a container, you might be doing this as a privileged user before in the container build you're dropping down to a regular user to do this. So that's in fact in some of my builds, I know when I read this I was like, I'm running Composer as root when I build my container, and that's really bad. And I don't remember if I ripped that out or not, but I want to go back to my project and go rip that out because that's they did fix it, but yeah.
So you are talking about the language that recently had a source code push that allowed you to execute PHP code directly in an HTTP header. So
PHP is just all about like executing code. I mean,
What
that's
could
really
possibly go wrong?
It's just really what it comes down to. It's really the other story I want to talk about. CISA releases an ICS advisory on real-time operating systems.
Yeah.
Oh, what was this one?
I posted this one in Slack because when I read this,
Amazon, ARM, any of the
free. I didn't realize
Linux,
Amazon is maintaining free RTOS.
Yep. As part of their IT IoT
and I'm
stuff.
like, wait. So I'm going through my list of RTOS real-time operating systems. VxWorks is in there prior to 7.0. UC libc NG.
Google Cloud IoT devices.
Yep.
Samsung Tizen is classified as an RTOS, which I thought was super interesting.
Red Hat.
Oh my God! Like there's a whole
Red Hat
Red Hat New Lib.
list.
So it's not Red Hat.
Lib,
It's Red Hat New Lib.
But now it's not just one vulnerability. It's a list of blah, 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 13, 14, 23, 23 vulnerabilities in this. I don't know if all 23 apply to all RTOSs, but it sounds like that does.
Oof.
And I'm kind of one frightened.
Well, these are being actively exploited, though. That's the big thing. Like, this is public. They're trying to get this fixed because it's being actively exploited now. That's bad.
But what I want is the exploit code for the Samsung because all the TVs in here in the studio, all 17 of them run Samsung Tizen.
Do they run Android?
No, these are all Tizen. I know for a fact they're all Tizen because I did the menu hack based on our previous story.
Got it. Okay.
Because I wanted to get in and why was I in the menus? I wanted to turn the sound off on them and adjust other.
Yep.
Because these are the monitors we have here in the studio. By the way, none of which I enabled Wi-Fi on because I didn't want them connected to the network for just this reason, right? But secondly, like I wanted to, they're acting as monitors, not TVs,
right.
And I wanted more control over, like, I don't need audio coming from any of them.
Yep.
I don't need all the fancy stuff. Like I wanted to be able to basically disable features. So I got into the hidden menus. I covered it on a previous episode. There's a wiki dedicated to hacking Samsung TVs. And I'm like, oh, if I could get a remote code execution, then I could get shell access to all my TVs and manage them and maybe disable features remotely and do things probably you're not supposed to be able to do in Samsung TVs, but things I wanted to do to hack our TVs to be more like an embedded system IoT device rather than a TV. Like I want to disable the menus entirely, disable a lot of those smart features, maybe go beyond what you could do in the hidden debug menus. And maybe I would exercise. Is it illegal to exercise an exploit for that? We need a lawyer on the show.
There's a legal precedence on one of your stories for that.
Right? That like I own the device, therefore I can do what I want with it, kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of.
That's one way of looking at it.
There's only a few of these. Well, a lot of these do have updates, but a lot of these are end of life, not going to be updated, confirmed, not updated, in progress. So like this is still a big deal, and it was an integer overflow that was causing almost all of these through that bad alloc, which is crazy for a real-time operating system. This is crazy easy to exploit. So I imagine there's a ton of POC code out right now.
If maybe someone could send Bob, the evil hacker, some of that exploit code.
I think Alice will just drop some exploit code for you.
The one that of course most that comes to me that I'd be most interested in is the Amazon free RTOS and the VxWorks.
VxWorks for sure. VxWorks, because VxWorks is used in a lot of industrial control systems now.
It's all over the bloody place.
Industrial control systems, car entertainment systems.
Some of the building automation stuff that Fred was talking about runs VxWorks for sure. I remember some of that now.
Like we talked about like VxWorks back in the day.
Was it HG Moore dropped an exploit for VxWorks back in the day?
Back in the day, like VxWorks has been around a long time.
There was that one at Black Hat. Well, it was 2 years ago. It was 2019, Black Hat 2019. During Black Hat, and it wasn't at Black Hat. It was a full, like the first time all VxWorks were vulnerable all the way back and forward for everything they had, and it was full remote code executions. Like it was nasty.
Yeah, all the things are vulnerable.
That's probably the most prolific story we have this week. Like,
so what blew me away is that this was discovered by it looks like it was discovered by Microsoft Section 52. They're the Azure Defender group.
So Lee, thank you for that. I had a tough time, and I just looked at it quick, but I had a tough time figuring out like who found all 23 vulnerabilities in VxWorks. Who was commissioned in doing that? It was Microsoft.
I posted a link to their article in Discord. It's got some nice diagrams of what they do. I just was surprised. I mean, Microsoft's been growing some skills. I know it, but man, they just like talk about welcome to the party.
And I wonder, I think about some of the other cloud computing stuff, like Amazon and Google both having some version of an RTOS for their IoT stuff. Is Microsoft moving in that direction? I mean, they've got Windows 10 for IoT, and are they looking to implement an RTOS in Azure?
Well, Azure Sphere Azure Sphere devices were vulnerable in my story number 11. Interesting how Cisco Talos found an information disclosure vulnerability that allowed an attacker to view kernel stack memory, which basically allows you to bypass ASLR. I don't think they call it ASLR in... What did they call it in Linux? They called it something else. Error establishing database connection. That's what I got when I went to the link.
Which one?
My story number 11. KASLR. Kernel address space layout randomization. Talos team found a way to bypass that in the issue is on an Azure Sphere device version 20.10, a 32-bit ARM device that runs a patched Linux kernel, basically allowing you to know what the memory addresses are to bypass the randomization was the bug they found. In Azure Sphere, which is the Microsoft product that we interviewed the architect behind Azure Sphere a year or two ago on the show. I can't remember his name, and I apologize to that person for not remembering your name, but you're awesome. Even though everyone's vulnerabilities, whatever aside, that was a great conversation.
But there is a relevant comment there, though, in terms of IoT and operating systems that are running these small stacks. We've all known there's been this enormous opportunity for a long time that if somebody can come in with some really good software update technology and solve this problem to push real updates, then they're going to take the market. And one has to think that Microsoft's interested in that angle.
That was Azure Sphere, was designed to do exactly what you described, Joff.
Yeah.
And interesting that they found a vulnerability in it. But good that they found it and disclose it, and Microsoft will fix it. Because again, I mean, we all know you can't build something that doesn't have some kind of vulnerability. I think that your security is measured by your ability to recognize, fix, and push that fix as quickly as possible. All of us can't sit here as hosts and go, yeah, I can build a piece of software that's 100% resilient. I don't think anyone here would say that.
Oh, I can.
Hello world.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Or 10 go to 20 or exactly. 10 print home, I go to 30 go to 20. Yeah. I can do that.
Input, please enter your name with a buffer that's 20 characters.
No input. No, I can't. No input, no output. Oh, well, I was going to say no output, but yeah.
Oh, I did have two.
We should think about
two stories to wrap up with, which are awesome stories to wrap up. One, I want to implore you to Google search June 15th, 1990 AT&T outage, because in my reading of classic hacker things, they basically blamed hackers for the widespread telephone long distance outage on AT&T's network that turned out to be a software bug. In the book I'm reading detailed that how they were in a do while loop in a switch statement that had an if statement in it that led to the bug that took out most of the long distance service for all of the Northeast, which in turn they blamed on hackers. So we want to read into hacker
Classic
history.
Denial of service, right?
I implore you to read about that bug, because I thought it was, when I was listening to the book and processing like what they were saying about the code, I'm like, I didn't know like they had that information that they could talk about like how in the details in the code how that played out. I thought that was fascinating. You can read lots of great articles about that.
Yep.
It was basically a bug. It took them 9 hours or something like that to fix. Like it was down for quite a long time. Go ahead, Lee.
So in 1990, weren't we still doing structured coding? Where everything was supposed to have one entry point, one exit point, no branching. As in go to.
I believe you are correct. It was system. It was System 7 Unix. System 7 was Unix.
Yeah.
It was System 7. It was their AT&T's upgrading their switching systems, which were all computers then. Whereas before, because I'm reading about old phone system stuff. Like before, like dial 0 for operator.
Yep.
Like your operator was literally had 10,000 ports in front of them. That was the maximum amount of ports they could have in front of them without having to get up from their chair. And they would literally, when someone picked up the receiver and dial the number, they would connect that person to the other person, right? And that was the operator. They moved to computers to do that switching on an automatic basis.
The 5ESS.
Bug stemmed from AT&T upgrading from System 6 to System 7.
Interesting.
I love the nerdy.
Yep. Please tell me your last story is number 23.
Oh, abso-freaking-lutely.
Now, admittedly, this is an older story.
Oh, yeah.
But it is hilarious.
It came up in my feed, and, I I love reading about the effects of drugs on the mind and people who have studied how drugs impact the mind. Like, I just think that's fascinating. Also, having run a podcast for 15 years, I'm an audio engineering nerd. I'm not an audio engineer by trade. Like, it's a total hacker thing for me. Like, I read articles about audio engineering and just in pure fascination. But Elliot Curtis was cleaning a popular 1960s piece of equipment, and in like that cleaning process, he noticed this like crystallized substance on this keyboard. It was a keyboard
Synthesizer.
a synthesizer that was by someone else. What was the guy's name? Albert Hoffman, whose first synthesizer. Oh no,
Abby Hoffman. Wait,
no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It was Don Buchla.
Yep.
It was a Buchla synthesizer. The interesting part was Albert Hoffman synthesized LSD in 1943. Accidentally dosed himself with a drug in the manner as well. Also, in the article, Don Buchla was friends with the audio engineer from Grateful Dead. And the audio engineer from Grateful Dead also synthesized his own LSD. Now, Elliot, the dude that was cleaning this equipment or restoring this equipment from the 1960s, accidentally dosed himself with LSD because the residue was still on there. It was stored in like a cool, dark, kind of damp basement kind of thing, which preserved the drug.
Trip.
Dude tripped for 9 hours.
Yep.
His wife was like, what is going on? The dude tripped for 9 hours.
On 50-year-old LSD.
On 50-year-old LSD.
Yep.
I just thought that was... I don't know what that has to do with hacking or computer security, but I thought that was a really, really cool story.
The point being here is that the rumor was that the musicians would, dip their fingers in LSD and touch their equipment,
touch the keyboards.
to find inspiration.
Yeah.
And the LSD was still on the keyboard in a deep, dark dungeon, and he cleaned it and wiped it off. And
still tripped for 9 hours.
You know what? I've never been a collector of vintage keyboards.
But now
I might start.
Now you might start. Be careful. I hope you don't have plans for 9 hours because you're physically not going anywhere, but your mind is going places for the next 9 hours.
I'm sorry, Joff's not home right now. He'll be back in a few hours.
It is. You're right. It is an older article, but I thought it was really just an amazing story. Good read. Read.
Yep.
Awesome.
With
that, thank you everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Over and out.